This cactus needs some serious help. The previous owner who had it potted in exclusively potting soil and left it outside, so it became severely overwatered, killed some of the stalks of the cactus. And even for the healthy stalks, there's a bit of rotted material down at the bottom that has me worried. A few other problems is the pot is broken and needs to be fixed, and the plant also is leaning on the window. So I'd like to straighten that up and have a bit of more support so it can stand by itself. Finally, I want to take some of the healthy new growth at top, as well as some of the stalks that have significant amount of dead material, and propagate those into new plants in the same pot that will replace the old ones as they die off. So what I brought with me to repot this is several pots of different varying sizes and depths. Once I pull the plant out of this pot, I want to see how big the root ball is. For the replacement pot, you don't want it a lot larger than the root ball. Cactuses like to be in a bit smaller of pots, and you don't want a lot of extra material around the roots holding moisture, a lot of unnecessary extra material. I also brought some pre-mixed potting soil that I mixed up with potting soil, grit, sand, and perlite, so it'll dry very quickly and doesn't have excessive amounts of organic material to hold moisture, which will encourage rot of the roots. I brought a tarp to lay down and collect anything that I drop, various tools to mix soil, to trim the cactus, to cut the cactus. I brought a knife. I also brought some stakes to put into the soil afterwards to hold it up and help support it. I've got leather gloves, an old work jacket, and also some towels. The towels I'll potentially wrap around the plant if needed to protect me from the spines. And I also brought a few rocks to put down in the bottom around the hole in the bottom of the pot. There's a lot of roots that are coming all the way down to the base of the pot, and also one or two that are coming out of the bottom of the pot. But there's also a lot of extra material here that's pure potting soil that doesn't have any roots in it. So I'm going to remove as much of that as I can to get a better sense of how big the root ball actually is. There's a bunch of big rocks down here in the bottom that were taking up a good portion, the bottom several inches of the pot. Not a terrible idea for a cactus which has shallow roots, but that might end up with a smaller root ball than I expected. So the next step after getting all this excess soil out of the way is going to be to remove the portions that are already dead and any associated dead root material. For a 6-foot tall plant, that's a very small root ball. Looks like it's only about 9 inches deep and 7 inches wide. Mostly I'm going to leave it intact, but I'm going to trim off just a couple of these extra long roots. And that is most of the soil back in the pot. Next, I have to select the pot size. I'm not going to use the biggest pot I have, but I'm going to use something that is reasonably large, just a little bit smaller than the pot that it was in. This is a 16-inch pot. I'm going to put it in a 14-inch pot. Technically, this root ball might fit in a smaller pot, but I want it to have a little bit of room to grow. I also want to put a lot of the smaller cactuses around the outer edge, and I want this pot to be substantial enough and heavy enough to support that heavy of a plant. The next step is going to be to put some rocks in the bottom of the pot, and then a little bit of soil to get it up to the level that I want, so that this cactus is sitting with the roots just several inches below the top of my pot. Then I'm going to lift the plant up, put it in the pot, and fill in around it. So this has grown a bit crooked as it's been leaning over the last few years, and it tries to go straight up. You can see the curve here. I'm going to try to compensate and go about halfway between the two. So I'll have a little bit of a lean this way at the bottom and a little bit of a lean this way at top. Hopefully it'll straighten out, but ideally I want the weight centered over the roots so it doesn't fall over. And ideally you want the soil to be around the same level as it was previously, just above where the roots are coming out. I'm going to go slightly deeper than that just because this plant really needs the support. Then I may press some stakes in down around the roots, which will help support the plant by pinning the root ball to the soil, and also some support further up the stalk as well. So this is freestanding now, but it's not as secure as I'd like, so I'm going to use a bungee to hold these two side stakes. I left the two side stakes a little bit longer, so I'm gonna use a bungee to hold them together, both until I get this trimmed down a little bit above, and also until this can get a little bit established and grow more roots out into the new potting soil and gravel. Hopefully this will be a temporary solution, but with the rotting damage that happened at the base of these with the previous owner, they may need some support longer term. I'm going to put these smaller cactuses that already have roots directly in the pot, at least the ones that look decent. The ones that I trimmed off, I'm going to let this bottom callus over before I put them in. Minimum, I'm going to let it callus a day. Some people will say let it last for a week or more so that this completely calluses over and dries out so it doesn't rot when you put it in the soil. A few weeks after transpotting this cactus, I've got a bunch of the cuttings down in the base. The soil is draining really well. The cactus seems to be doing fairly well, putting out new leaves and new growth. We'll wait a while, because cactuses tend to grow slowly. We'll wait a while to see how it's actually doing, but I think it was a success.